The other layers that you should know about, which are beyond the scope of this course, are dropout layer and batch normalization layers. These are layers that help train very deep neural networks by getting them sort of unstuck in their gradients to be unstuck, in the sense that so if you have a dropout, basically if you have a bunch of neurons and then you have another bunch of neurons in the next layer and so forth, right, and they are fully connected or they are convolutionally connected or whatever that is. During training, we randomly take some neurons and drop them out, and there is a dropout probability. There is a probability by which they are dropped out, and there are heuristics for what is a good probability for what type of layer and what location of the layer. And by dropping, what that means is that the reliance, the codependence on two neurons in the same layer is broken, or any two neurons is broken, and we have to keep training assuming that this particular neuron is not reliable, and because of that the other neurons learn independently useful features. So that is the main idea behind this. Another layer is batch normalization layer, where when you have very deep neurons, very deep neural networks, and all these inputs are flowing in this direction, then for one particular neuron the gradients can be very small or very large. So what it does is it catches it takes the outputs of all the batches, the gradients of all the batches, and it normalizes them again. So basically it rescales them and it learns the scaling parameters also. So that helps the neural network train faster and not get stuck because of very small gradients in some deeper layers and very large gradients. Other concepts that are useful for neural networks is that we were looking at only one layer at a time, but many times there are two parallel layers or two parallel paths that can exist in more advanced neural network architectures. So for example, what we have seen is that you have a previous output and it goes through a feature extraction, which is nothing but a layer, right? So it could be a fully connected layer or it could be a convolutional layer, and we get an output. But in something called residual networks, we take the same input and we add it to that particular output, which means that the number of channels that you will have here and the number of channels in the input are going to be the same. Only then you can add it. The advantage of that is that if the weights here are too small and the gradient gets stuck, the gradient has an alternative path to train the lower layers. Similarly, we can have two layers. We can have one set of convolutional filters here, another set of convolutional filters here, and then we can concatenate their output. This is a particular approach that was taken in inception networks for image processing. Another type of layer is that we send the input through one feature extraction. This could be a convolutional layer. We could have another convolutional layer, but here the output is not sent through a ReLU activation. So this is, let's say, through ReLU. This one is sent through a softmax or a sigmoid activation, and then basically it acts as a 0 or 1 gate that gets multiplied to allow this to flow or not allow this to flow, and that is called attention. So it basically says that whether we should put attention or not put attention, because this output is going to be between 0 and 1, whether to put attention or not put attention on one of the outputs from the other branch. Okay, so that is called attention type parallel connection. So these are all parallel connections. So the layers need not be only in a sequence, they can also be, some layers can be next to each other parallelly. Another concept is something called multi-headed neural network. The idea here is that you may have one input to a neural network layers, but then you can give the output to two different other neural networks. And these could be very small neural networks, and you have two different outputs and two different objectives, both of them are sending gradients back to the original neural network or the original set of the lower set of layers. An example would be, let's say we have an image and we not only want to localize the object, we want to do a regression on the object. So this could be a regression, bounding box regression. So this regression gives you the xmin, xmax, or the location min, location max, and so basically the four corners of the detection box, right. So this will give you 4 numbers. You are doing regression on 4 numbers to find the box that encloses the object, and here we are doing classification to say which class of object is it. Is it a horse or a dog or an elephant and whatnot? Okay. So we can have 2 different objectives, and those are the 2 different heads on the neural network. So we call this NN1 and NN2, but actually it's a same neural network with 2 different branches, so to speak. So those are multi-headed neural networks. So there, because all of these are end-to-end differentiable, a lot of these different configurations are possible. So here, if we go back to the side branches, again the gradient coming back will go to both sides, right. The gradient coming back will go to both sides, and here only here one has to be careful that now we have to apply chain rule to a product of 2 functions, which we haven't seen before, but it's not difficult to figure out, and I will reserve that for a future course. All right. Now there are situations where we want to not treat each input of a neural network as independent from another input. Until now we have been assuming that they are IID, independently identically distributed, but let's say the input, each input, actually the training samples come in a sequence. Okay, this sequence could be a sequence of words and text, or it could be a series of sequence of stock prices in a time series and so forth. So for time series and for natural languages where you have an order of words, we need some special structures to map long range dependencies. So for example, if we are talking about natural language processing, the words at the end of the sentence could be related to words at the beginning of the sentence or even the previous sentence. So for example, if I say that Lisa went to the kitchen, she picked up a knife, so she is now related to Lisa, which was actually in the previous sentence, or it could be multiple sentences before. So it's a very long range dependency to disambiguate what is she, right, and or who is she, and this long range dependency is something that goes beyond convolution and pooling. So we need a concept of a memory where some of these important nuggets of information can be stored once they are extracted by a neural network. So this brings us to something called a recurrent neural network. So these recurrent neural networks they remember and they pass the information to future inputs. So for example, let's say we have an input xn at time location or time instance n, and we are trying to give an output yn, right. Now here internally it will compute some intermediate output h of n, but that h of n will act as an input to the future x of n plus 1. So when that is processed, this will act as an input to that. Similarly, for this particular input, the previous hidden state is going to be another input to the neural network before we get the output. Okay, so the h is dependent on not just x but h of the previous time instance. So here's what the sequence might look like. So if we have x of n minus 3, we will get h of n minus 3, which goes to computation on x of n minus 2, which gives you h of n minus 2, which goes to the computation on x of n minus 1 and so forth. So this state, hidden unit output, is sent forward in time and it's a remembered state. Okay. Another way of looking at it is that we have this computation of h of n from the input xn, and then it is sent to a time delay and it comes back. when we are it comes back as h of n minus 1 for the next state. Okay, so these are different ways of looking at the same thing. So the internal structure will be that we will have an n dimensional input, okay, and we will have, let's say, an c dimensional output, or a dimensional input and a c dimensional output, and a b dimensional hidden unit, right, and they are all getting inputs from the previous time state. Okay, so the input to this is not just x but also h of n minus 1, and they are all fully connected. So just to revise non-recurrent neural networks, we will have an input, it will be multiplied with a weight matrix x of x, w of x to h, wxh, and then it will be sent through some non-linearity, we will get the hidden unit output that will be multiplied with another set of weights from h to y, and then let's say if it is classification, then it will go through a softmax non-linearity, and then we will get y. Okay, so this is a regular neural network without recurrence or memory, and it gets changed to something like this, where we have the input and we have the previous state, and then we get the output. Inside this, what is happening is that we have a weight that multiplies with x, but then the previous hidden state gets multiplied with another set of weight, a weight matrix. This is a square weight matrix. This need not be square, this can be rectangular, but this has to be square because it is acting upon the it is taking the previous hidden state of whatever dimension it is and producing an output of the same dimension. So it's a square matrix, and then this also need not be square, this can be rectangular, that the one that is helping us compute the output. Okay, and then that is again sent through a tanh nonlinearity. Need not be tanh, we can actually also have other kinds of nonlinearity, but this is just for the sake of argument. So how this will be trained is during back propagation, we will start to send the gradients back. So we will compare this against some target value Tn, and based on the loss, we will send the gradient back. That gradient will be now sent back here, and from here it will be sent back to tune these weights, and it will be sent back here to tune these weights. Okay, and to tune these weights, some gradient here is also coming back, which is from future, from that future time instance. Okay, so that is called back propagation through time. So now if we unfold this entire time, unroll the time, right? So this particular, the difference between Tn and Yn, or whatever is the gradient here, is being propagated here to tune these weights as well as to tune these weights, and through these weights it is being tuned, it is tuning w of xh again, and it is tuning this w of hh again, and so forth. Okay, so these are only affected by one output, the w of hy, but w of xh and hh are being affected by several outputs. So we cannot have them be affected by infinite number of outputs if we have a very long sequence. So we just limit it to, let's say, a window of 50 or 100. Within that window, we will tune it for every output, okay, and it will back propagate back through time. Now this creates a problem. Okay, this creates a problem which we will see very soon, which we need to resolve. Okay, so the mathematical expression for this for back propagation through time would be that if you have an input, it gets multiplied with some weights, and then it also gets input from the previous time instance. So for forward propagation, this will go into the activation function, then we will multiply it with the second set of weights and send it through another activation function to compute y. Now if we take the back propagation, then what is the derivative of y with respect to w11, right? So here we are taking the chain of partial derivatives. So it is going to be g dash w to hn dash, and when we expand hn dash, the derivative of hn, then what we get is something like this, and within that we have hn minus 1 dash also. Okay. So because of that, what we get is this entire path where the derivatives keep coming back and they keep getting multiplied with WHH. So basically, if your WHH is kind of large or kind of small, if it is large, then several large weights will get multiplied with each other and we will have an explosion of gradients. If we have WHH to be small in magnitude, then several of them will get multiplied and we will have a vanishing gradient. So we have either a vanishing or an exploding gradient problem. So to control that, we should not have a path where weights are repeatedly multiplied by themselves or with other weights. We should have some way of modulating what gets multiplied, and that is precisely the problem that long short-term memories try to solve. Okay. So, and this problem actually also exists in deep neural networks like convolution neural networks, where we are not multiplying the same weights again and again, but we are multiplying weights of different layers while computing the chain rule of the gradients. So for example, for the lth layer, we have WL times f, the activation function of L minus 1 times WL L minus 1 and then WL minus 2, etc., etc. So when we take the gradient and we go deep into try to compute the gradient for one of the deeper layers closer to the input, all these weights will get multiplied with each other, and because of that, if the weights are too large or too small in a sequence, then we will have a vanishing or an exploding gradient. The way to check that in convolution neural networks is careful weight initialization. So there is something called Xavier initialization or Kamenhi initialization. So that should be carefully followed while initializing the weights of deep convolution neural networks. The recurrent neural networks have a different problem, that it's the same weight matrix that gets multiplied, it's not the weight matrix of different layers. Because we are sending it back through time, the WHH gets multiplied with itself multiple times. And to avoid that, there is a special structure that was proposed by Graves et al. And in this case, basically we never sent the error back through the same set of the gradient back through the same set of weights again and again. So here each arrow is a weight. This is one hidden neuron of an LSTM, and basically the way it works is it works on this multiplication type of operations which we haven't encountered so far, which I just alluded to when I was talking about attention layers. So here every input, so this particular neuron has one input that is coming from, so it has three different gates, let me put it this way. So we have an input gate, okay, and we have a forget gate, and we have an output gate. What is a gate? Gate, basically its output ranges from 0 to 1. It has a sigmoid activation. So all the three F's have sigmoid. F is equivalent to sigmoid. Okay, and here the input, so the output of these gates ranges from 0 to 1. So it basically either allows the other input to flow through or it stops it. So similarly, this input either allows this to flow through or it stops it. It lets it flow through when it is 1, it stops it when the output is 0. Similarly, this allows this to flow through or not flow through. So that is the idea, and because of this multiplication, now that chain of W's getting multiplied with each other, that gets broken. So now these gates either allow or disallow input, allow or disallow output, allow or disallow remembering of the state itself. So there is an internal state which is not accessed. So whether it will come back in next in time. So these circular arrows means it is in the next time with one delay. So here there is a delay element here. So it will get either remembered, or it will be overwritten by whatever is the input. So it will either remember what it has, or it will pick up the new input and process that. And there are several of these neurons in the hidden layer. Because of that, it can remember high dimensional encodings of the input. So I'll not go too much into the detail, but basically these are some of the problems with neural networks that have been sequentially been resolved by different newly proposed neural network architectures and deep learning paradigms that has allowed us to process text, to process time series, to process images, to process videos and medical data and speech and audio at an astonishing rate in the last 10 years. With this, I come to an end of this lecture. I hope you enjoyed what I taught about long short-term memories and convolutional neural networks. Thank you.